Okay, so we saw last time the issue that Yeshayahu offered Achaz to pick a sign in Ot, which will demonstrate the truth of the prophecy of Yeshayahu. And then we got off a little bit on a tangent on the idea of the Ot of a prophet, a Navi providing an Ot, a sign. What is the merit of that? And we studied the words of the Rambam, who explains that that there are stages where people need an oath, a sign, in order to believe in the prophet, but it's not considered a very high level of faith. Why? Because it's a faith that can always one casts doubt on it. Maybe there was some sort of trickery involved or something of the sort. Maybe the sign could be explained in some other way, and our belief is really founded on the revelation at Sinai, where all the people of Israel heard Hashem speaking to Moshe, which is more powerful and evident rather than just some sort of miraculous sign. Okay. However, as we studied, Achaz refuses even this sign. He sort of phrases his words carefully, saying, "Lo eshal velo anaseh et Hashem," as we learned. Let me go back to the verse just so we can see it again. He says, "V'yomer Achaz, lo eshal velo anaseh et Hashem." I will not ask, I will not test the Lord. So he's trying to be a bit clever, as if he's righteous. He's not testing the Lord, but Yeshayahu is not deceived by this, and he says, "V'yomer shimuna beit David, hame'at mikem alaot enoshim ki tal'u gam et Elohai." Listen, house of David, Isaiah retorted, is it not enough for you to treat men as helpless, that you also treat my God as helpless? In other words, he's understanding that Achaz really is not asking for the sign because he doesn't believe in Hashem, right? As we know, Achaz turned to idolatry, all forms of idolatry. He's lost all faith in Hashem. I think the Malbim explains, I quoted it. This is a problem when you get your source page.
Diane, I can hardly see. Are we on Yeshayahu, not Melachim? Okay.
Yeah, here I'm trying to make it larger. הלאות אנשים שאתם מייחסים לאות ופסיקת הכוח אל הנביאים, ולא תאמינו שיש כוח הנביא לעשות אות ופועט, כי תלאו עד שתייחסו לאות ופסיקת כוח גם אל אלוהי לבלתי אמן בתותיו. In other words, not only are you ascribing, in other words, he's saying to Achaz, not only are you ascribing weakness or helplessness to people. Who are the people? The people are the prophets. In other words, you don't believe that the prophet has power. Really, really, the one who you're ascribing helplessness to is to God. In other words, it's not a lack of faith in the prophet, but really what's happening here with Achaz is a lack of faith in Hashem. Okay, so Yeshayahu has attempted all these various ways to try to convince Achaz. As we saw, he had the parable about the fire burning out. He brought his son. He mentioned the earlier prophecy of the 65 years now reaching its culmination. He's offered Achaz to pick any sign that he wants. Achaz has refused. So what is Achaz going to do? So let's see what Achaz did. Again, and the whole question is, I mean, really, what are Achaz's choices? He's under siege from these two kings, Aram and Israel, Pekach of Israel and Retzin Melech Aram, and Yeshayahu is telling him basically do nothing. But what are his options? So one option is to submit to them. Another option is to somehow try to fight them. Yeshayahu is advising him not to do anything. But let's see what Achaz decides to do. So this appears in Sefer Melachim, the book of Melachim Bet, Melachim 2, chapter 16. Chapter 16 in Melachim 2 has the whole story of Achaz. Again, we're always jumping in between Yeshayahu and Melachim and Divrei Amim, trying to figure out the events that are going on. Melachim, it's usually brief. Divrei Amim, it's much more detailed. So let's see what in Melachim, how it's described. So it says here in verse number 5, in chapter 16 in the book of Melachim Bet, Kings 2, אז יעלה רצין מלך ארם ופקח בן מרמליהו מלך ישראל ירושלים אל המלחמה, ויצורו על אחז ולא יכלו להילחם. The king of Rezin of Aram and Pekach son of Remaliah of Israel advanced on Jerusalem for battle. They besieged Achaz but could not overcome him. בעת ההיא השיב רצין מלך ארם את אילת לארם, וינשל את היהודים מאילות, והאדומים באו אילת וישבו שם עד היום הזה. At that time, King Rezin of Aram recovered Eilat for Aram. He drove out the Judahites from Eilat, and Edomites came to Eilat and settled there, as is still the case. Okay, this is very significant because Eilat was one of the symbols of Uziyahu, right? Uziyahu's kingdom, one of the symbols of Uziyahu's kingdom, his successes, that's Achaz's grandfather, was that he managed to conquer Eilat, the port city on the southern tip of Israel, which was also a symbol already from the times of Shlomo Melech, who was the first one to build Eilat. And Achaz has basically lost power of Eilat. This is sort of a symbol that all the successes of Uziyahu, by the time his grandson Achaz has arrived, are all gone. Okay, so what does Achaz do now? Vayishlach Achaz malachim el Tiglat Pel-Eser melech Ashur lemor, avdecha ubincha ani, עלה והושיעני מכף מלך ארם ומכף מלך ישראל הקומים עליי. So who does Achaz call into to save him from Aram and from Israel? He's calling the Assyrians. We'll see if this is a smart move or not. Okay, so Achaz says messengers to King Pilat-Tileser of Assyria to say, I'm your servant and your son. Come and deliver me from the hands of the king of Aram and from the hands of the king of Israel who are attacking me. ויחקח אחז את הכסף ואת הזהב הנמצא בית אדוני ובאוצרות בית המלך וישלח למלך אשור שוחד. Achaz took the gold and silver that were on hand in the house of the Lord and in the treasuries of the royal palace, and sent them as a gift to the king of Assyria. So Achaz now empties out his treasury to send it all to Ashur, so that Ashur will come and save him from these two kings. What does Ashur do?
Keeps it.
Well, obviously he's going to keep the money, but he doesn't mind. He doesn't mind also going and conquering some people. So the king of Assyria responded to his request. I'm sorry, וישמע אליו מלך אשור, ויעל מלך אשור אל דמשק, ויתפסיה ויגליה קירה, ואת רצין המית. The king of Assyria responded to his request. The king of Assyria marched against Damascus and captured it. He deported its inhabitants to Kir and put Rezin to death. Okay, so this is what the Assyrians did. They conquered peoples and they exiled them. So here they took all the nation of Aram and exiled them to the city of Kir, which was a city in the kingdom of Assyria, and they also killed their king. What is Achaz's next step? וילך המלך אחז לקראת תגלת פלעשר מלך אשור דמשק, וירא את המזבח אשר בדמשק, וישלח המלך אחז אל אוריה הכהן את דמות המזבח ואת תבניתו לכל מעשהו. When King Achaz went to Damascus to greet King Tiglath-Pileser of Assyria, he saw the altar in Damascus. King Achaz sent the priest Uriah a sketch of the altar and a detailed plan of its construction. ויבן אוריה כהן את המזבח ככל אשר שלח המלך אחז מדמשק, כן עשה אוריה כהן עד בוא המלך אחז מדמשק. The priest Uriah did just as King Achaz had instructed him from Damascus. The king Uriah built the altar before the king Achaz returned from Damascus. So in other words, Achaz wants to build a replica of the altar that was in Damascus to build in Yerushalayim, and he did so. And when he returns, ויבוא המלך מדמשק, וירא המלך תח המזבח, ויקרב המלך על המזבח ויעל עליו. When the king returned from Damascus, and when the king saw the altar, the king drew near the altar, ascended it, ויקטר את עולתו ואת מנחתו, ויסך and offered his burnt offering and meal offering. He poured his libation. He dashed the blood of his offering of well-being against the altar. ואת המזבח הנחושת אשר לפני אדוני, ויקרב מבית פני הבית מבין המזבח ומבין בית אדוני, ויתן אותו על ירך המזבח צפונה. Okay. As for the bronze altar, which had been before the Lord, he moved it from its place in front of the temple, between the new altar and the house of the Lord, and placed it on the north side of the new altar. So he's actually sort of moving aside the proper mizbeach, the proper altar of the Beit HaMikdash, and inserting in its place this replica of the altar from Damascus. Okay, and this goes on and on. Okay, we won't read all the details, but why is Achaz doing this? Anybody have a suggestion? He's basically paid off the Assyrians to get rid of this threat from, Ritzin Melech Aram. They've done so. They've killed Ritzin. They've conquered Damascus, and now he's building a replica of the altar in Damascus in Yerushalayim. The altar of the people that he basically paid to have destroyed in exile. Why is he doing this?
I guess it's because he wants to appease Tilgat-Pilzer, and it'll be reported back to him that he's adopted your gods.
Yeah.
It's appeasing who?
Appeasing the Assyrian king.
Why the Assyrian king?
Because
We had something here.
I agree he's trying to appease, but he's building a mizbeach that was in Damascus. It doesn't seem to be an altar that was done by Tiglat-Pileser. This was an altar of Aram.
It's Avodah Zarah.
Yeah, of course it's Avodah Zarah, but why is he doing this specific Avodah Zarah?
There was something, I don't know.
I'll give you a reminder. We had something a bit similar to this.
Yes.
When I think it was Uzziah's father Amaziah, after, if I remember correctly, after he defeated the Edomim, the Edomites, he also worshipped their gods. Remember? I don't know if you remember that.
Is it so that he could absorb the power of their gods?
Yeah, something like that, I think.
Because the idea being that the gods had abandoned Retzin, so maybe the gods would look more favorably on Ahaz.
Right. I think it's something to that effect. In other words, you have to get into the head of these, a bit of into the idolatrous mind. But in the idolatrous mind, there are many gods, right? And each people or each tribe, they have their god. Now, in essence, when you're going to war against somebody, so to speak, also the gods are going to war. So if you defeat a nation, that's upsetting their god. So you have to appease their god. So it could be that, Ahaz is thinking, well, I've brought in the Assyrians, they've destroyed Aram, so now I'm in trouble with the gods of Aram, the gods of Damascus, because now nobody's worshiping that god. So I'll create a replica of that altar, and I'll appease the gods of Aram in that fashion. Okay. Because we see this is a recurring event in Tanakh. To us, well, you just beat them, so why? That means you're stronger than them. Maybe their god is worthless, but that's not apparently that wasn't the thinking. Okay. All right. So let's see. So that's what happens with one king. So we have here what happened with Aram, but Ahaz had two problems. One problem was Aram, so the Assyrians got rid of that. What happened with Israel? Now, again, the king that we're speaking about here in Assyria at this time is the one who's called in Tanakh Tiglat-Pileser. Again, this is another big issue, how to work through all the names of the kings of Ashur as they appear in Tanakh versus the historical records. That's a headache unto its own, but so we won't get into that. But even just within the Tanakh itself, to create consistency is difficult. But let's see what happens now also with Israel at this time. And again, the king of Israel was Pekach. So this appears earlier in Sefer Melachim. in the previous chapter, because the chapters in Melachim, they're somewhat chronological, but not completely. They sort of go back and forth between Israel and Aram, between Israel and Yehuda. So sometimes you could have something happen in Israel, and then you have the account of what was happening parallel to that time in Yehuda, and so it's not completely chronological. That's why this appears a little bit before. So here it says, in Melachim Perek Tedvav, chapter 15, verses 29 and 30, בימי פקח מלך ישראל, בא תגלת פלעשר מלך אשור, ויקח את עיון ואת אבל ואת בית מאחה ואת ינוח ואת קדש ואת חצור ואת הגלעד ואת הגלילה, כל ארץ נפתלי ויגלם אשורה. In the days of King Pekach of Israel, again, King Pekach, that was the one that was threatening Achaz. King Tiglat-Pileser of Assyria, that's the king that Achaz paid off, came and captured Ayon, Abel Beit Maacha, Kadesh, Chatzor, Gilad, Galilee, the entire region of Naphtali, and he deported the inhabitants to Assyria. Again, the Assyrians, this is what they did. They exiled. They didn't allow the people to remain locally under their power. They simply exiled them. ויקשור קשר הושע בן אלה על פקח בן רמליהו, ויכהו וימתהו וימלוך תחתיו בשנת 20 להיותם בן עוזיה. Hoshea, son of Elan, conspired against Pekach, son of Remaliah, attacked him and killed him. He succeeded him as king in the 20th year of Yotam, son of Uzziah. Soon we'll speak about this, what this means. But also in Divrei Hayamim, we have an account of this Tiglat-Pileser exiling a portion of the kingdom of Israel, because it says there, this is on Divrei Hayamim Aleph, the first Divrei Hayamim, first book of Chronicles, chapter 5, verse number 26. It says, Vayar Elohei Yisrael et ruach Pul melech Ashur ואת רוח תגלת פילנסר מלך אשור, ויגלם לראובני ולגדי ולחצי שבט מנשה, ויביאם לחלך וחבור והרה ונהר גוזן עד היום הזה. So the God of Israel roused the spirit of King Pul of Assyria, the spirit of King Tiglat-Pileser of Assyria, and he carried them away, namely the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Menashe, and brought them to Chalach, Habor, Hara, and the river Gozan to this day. So we see also the Assyrians, they haven't yet at this stage completely exiled the kingdom of Israel. That will only happen a generation later, but they've already exiled a substantial portion of the kingdom of Israel. The 2.5 tribes which lived on the other side of the Jordan River, right? Reuven, Gad, and Chatzish are exiled by Tiglat-Pileser, and as well a whole northern region of the what we would call nowadays Tzfon Galil, the northern part of the Galilee area in Israel, like you can see Chatzor, one of the well-known cities up north. All that region, the northern region of Israel, has been conquered and exiled by Ashur, and as well Pekach is killed. Okay, so Yeshayahu's prophecy has been fulfilled. In other words, the two kings, Pekach and Retzin, as he prophesied, are killed. They're destroyed. Aram is completely destroyed, exiled. Israel still exists, but is devastated after having, a good portion of its kingdom taken over by Ashur and its people exiled. And basically now the threat from these two kings is gone, but it didn't happen as Yeshayahu wanted it to happen. Yeshayahu would have liked this to happen on its own, without Achaz having paid off Ashur to do it, because Ashur probably, according to Yeshayahu, this was going to happen anyway. There was no need to pay them off, but now it has occurred due to the funding that Achaz provided Ashur to do it. What is Achaz's situation? Is all good with him now? Not really. Let's see why not.
Sorry, just one question. What does that expression "and the God of Israel rouse the spirit of the king of Assyria"? What does that mean?
Right. Well, basically, Assyria, it's considered to be in all the prophets, it's considered to be the arm. Hoy Ashur shevet api. Ashur is the stick of Hashem. Ashur is been called by Hashem to do all this destruction.
His wrath, yeah, the
It's
tool
the
of his
wrath
wrath.
of Hashem, Ashur. So that's how it's viewed.
Okay.
Again, eventually they will be punished as well because they sort of overstepped their mission. Not that I don't know how cognizant they were of what their mission was, but from the perspective of the nations of Israel, Ashur was sent to deliver the destruction as punishment for their sins. Okay, so what happens now with Achaz and Ashur is all good. Well, as we learn in Divrei Amim, not so good. Why? Let's see what happens in Yehuda. So this appears in Divrei Amim. In the Divrei Amim's account. Again, we're always looking at all the different places because once you see all the places, then you come closer to the full picture of what was happening. So this is in Divrei Amim Bet, the second book of Divrei Amim, chapter 28, verses 16 through 21. It says, "Ba'et hahi, shalach hamelech Achaz al malchei Ashur la'azor lo." At that time, King Achaz sent to the king of Assyria for help. Ve'od ba'u Edomim vayeku b'Yehuda vayeshbu shevi. Again, the Edomites came and inflicted a defeat on Judah and 2 captives. Again, Achaz, he was suffering from all directions. So he's got the Edomim coming from the southeast. He's got now the Plishtim to deal with. Plishtim pashtu b'arei Ashpela, והנגב ליהודה, וילכדו את בית שמש, ואת איילון, ואת הגדורות, ואת סוחו ובנותיה, ואת תמנע ובנותיה, ואת גימזו ואת בנותיה, וישבו שם. And the Philistines made forays against the cities of the Shpela and the Negev of Yehuda. They seized Beit Shemesh and Ayalon and Gderot and Socho with its villages, and Timna with its villages, and Gimna with its villages, and they settled there. Okay? כי הכניע אדוני את יהודה בעבור אחז מלך ישראל, והפריע ביהודה ומעלו מעל באדוני. Thus the Lord brought Judah low on account of the king Ahaz Israel, for he threw off restraint in Judah and trespassed against the Lord. Now let's see what happens with Ashur. ויבלע עליו תגלת פילנסר מלך אשור, ויצר לו ולא חזקו. תגלת פילנסר, king of Assyria, marched against him and gave him trouble instead of supporting him. כי חלק אחז את בית אדוני ואת בית המלך בשרים, ויתן למלך אשור ולא לעזרה לו. For Achaz plundered the house of the Lord and the house of the king and the officers, and he made a gift to the king of Assyria to no avail. So we see when Tiglath-Pileser, he didn't stop at getting rid of Aram and getting rid of Pekach and Israel. He also wants to take over Yehuda, and he's not exactly showing up to Achaz, oh, I'm so grateful for your payment. He wants it all. Okay, so Achaz bringing in Ashur, it got rid of him of the one problem he had, but now he has a much bigger problem that Ashur wants to take over all of Yehuda. So now Ashur is beginning to cause trouble to Yehuda. So it's sort of like the expression, you win the battle but you lose the war, right? There's such a, so that's essentially what happened here with Achaz paying off Ashur. Okay, now let's go back to a very problematic verse that we read a few minutes ago. And this is as follows. We go back to Sefer Melachim Bet. It says, we read this earlier in chapter 15, verse number 30. It says, Vayikshor Kesher, Hoshea ben Elah al Pekach ben Remaliyahu, Vayakeu Vayimiteu Vayimloch Tachtav Bishnat 20 Liyotam ben Uzziah. Hoshea son of Elah conspired against Pekach son of Remaliah, attacked him and killed him. He succeeded him as king in the 20th year of Yotam son of Uzziah. There's a big problem in this verse. Can somebody explain to me what it is?
The chronology doesn't match.
Yeah, explain. Very good.
Uzziah would have been a lot. Uzziah's reign would have been much earlier than that, right?
Well, it says the 20th year of Yotam, the son of Uzziah. That was the time, in the 20th year of Yotam, the son of Uzziah, Pekach ben Remaliahu was assassinated by Hoshea ben Elah. It cannot be. Why not? You're right. There's a big problem here. It cannot be, but why not?
If I remember, Rabbi, there were two Yotams. There's a Yotam, king of Israel, as well as a Yotam, king of Judah. No, or maybe maybe they got
No,
the
they
wrong
had
Yotam.
they had some names which were on both of them. I don't remember Yotam being one of them.
No.
No, but this is clearly Yotam ben Uzziah. This is the Yotam, the father of Achaz. Yotam, the son of Uzziah, father of Achaz.
Yeah.
Because Hoshea is after Achaz.
He is.
Again, who are the kings that were attacking Achaz? We had Retzin Melech Aram, and who was the king of Israel?
Pekach.
Pekach.
Pekach of Remaliah.
So Pekach was still alive in the days of Achaz. Okay? So it cannot have been that Pekach was killed during the days of Yotam. Pekach was still alive and well when Yotam's son Achaz was the king. Furthermore, Yotam did not reign for 20 years. Yotam only reigned for 16 years. Okay, if you look earlier in the book of Melachim, it says that Yotam reigned only for 16 years. Okay, so Pekach outlived Yotam. He ended up attacking Achaz, and ultimately Achaz paid off Ashur, and Ashur came, attacked Israel, and that brought about the assassination of Hoshea to Pekach. So what does it mean that he was killed in the 20th year of Yotam? There was no 20th year of Yotam. Yotam only ruled for 16 years. Secondly, even if we could somehow work out, maybe Yotam reigned longer because of the whole, there was a certain overlap between Yotam and Uzziah, so we can add some more years to Yotam. Still, Yotam was already dead at this point. He was already succeeded by his son Achaz, and Pekach, as we know in all sources, was alive and well during the days of Achaz. Okay, so this verse seems to say something that cannot be. Okay, so let's see how. So the main source in Chazal for addressing these types of problems, and there are many such type of problems in Tanakh regarding the years of the kings, is Seder Olam Rabbah. It's like a midrash that tries to explain the whole, chronological history of the Tanakh, and it says as follows. This is the answer they give. Very interesting. באותה שעה, ויקשור קשר הושע בן אלה וגומר. בשנת 20 ליותם בן עוזיה, היא שנת 4 לאחז הייתה. So Seder Olam says, when it says 20th year of Yotam, it actually means the 4th year of Achaz. Why? Because Yotam ruled for 16 years. So the 20th year of Yotam, which doesn't exist really, is really 40 years into Achaz. So this happened in the 4th year of Achaz. If Shaul Malkin, so how can you say the 20th year of Yotam? It's impossible. By the way, this is an expression, if Shaul Malkin, which Seder Olam Rabbah uses consistently on. Each time that there are these problems with the years, it uses this expression. If Shaul Malkin, is it possible to say such a thing? So what's the answer? Ela shaita gzera gzura miyimei Yotam. In other words, the reason, even though this was the 4th year of Achaz, it's ascribed this year to Yotam, the 20th year of Yotam. Why? Because it was already decreed that this would happen earlier in the days of Yotam, it was already decreed that this would happen. Okay, so even though it's yeah, I'm sorry. Somebody wanted to say something?
Well, could I intervene? I did read somewhere that Ahaz reigned in tandem with his son and maybe his father. Would that have any bearing on this if that was the case? There's only a small period of Ahaz's reign that he actually reigned alone.
Okay, that could be. I know for Yotam, it's definitely true. There was an overlap between Yotam and Uzziyahu. Yotam began to reign in the times of Uzziyahu when Uzziyahu became a leper. There was also an overlap between Uzziyahu and his father Amaziah. I don't remember if there was also the case regarding Ahaz. It could well be. That could be another possible answer. And like I mentioned, there are other answers to this question. So it could be maybe that there was some overlap. That's another possibility. But Seder Olam Rabbah is not saying that. Seder Olam Rabbah is saying, really, Yotam was dead. It was the 4th year of Ahaz. But because it was already decreed in the heavens in the days of Yotam that this would occur, even though technically it occurred already in the times of Ahaz, that's why this year is counted to the years of Yotam. And that's why it says the 20th year of Yotam. Davar acher, second answer that the Midrash offers, רצה הכתוב למנות ליותם בקבר ולא לאחז בחיים. In other words, because Ahaz was a wicked king, the verse did not want to count to the years of Ahaz and preferred to count to the years of Yotam in his grave. In other words, to continue counting the years of the previous king, Yotam, who was the righteous king, even though he was already in his grave and he was already dead. Okay, those are the two answers that the Midrash offers why it says the 20th year of Yotam, which really just means the 4th year of Ahaz. I think these two answers, they work very well with everything we studied, in terms of what Yeshayahu has said. Okay, for two reasons. First of all, let's take the first answer. In other words, it was already decreed that this would happen. That, again, what happened? That Pekach would be killed. Essentially, that's what it says. Hoshea rebelled against Pekach and he was killed. This is what Yeshayahu was saying. Yeshayahu is telling, this is what Yeshayahu is trying to tell Ahaz. It's already been decreed in the heavens that Retzin and Pekach, their days are numbered. Okay? In other words, you have nothing there, and that's why he was trying to convince Ahaz not to do anything. So it's sort of, it's saying, why is the verse counting to the times of Yotam? In other words, it's trying to tell us, we already knew this was going to happen. Already from earlier, from the days of Yotam already, we knew that this was coming, that Pekach's days are numbered. That's exactly what Yeshayahu was trying to convince Ahaz the whole time. You have nothing to worry about Pekach.
Okay, thank you. I don't know who you are. Please go back.
The stub that's burning out. His days are over, and he's gone. You don't have to worry about it. Okay, so that's certainly one message of Yeshayahu, and that explanation fits well with that message of Yeshayahu. I think the second message also fits in well with Yeshayahu, because let's think about what happened here. Again, the Assyrians were coming. There's no doubt about that. All of this was going to happen, right? That's what Yeshayahu has been saying this whole time. The Assyrians are coming. All of this is going to happen. The kingdom of Israel is going to be exiled. Aram is going to be exiled. Yehuda, most of Yehuda is going to be exiled, and only Yerushalayim will survive. All of this is going to happen regardless of whatever you do. But what has Ahaz contributed to this? Essentially, what happened, and by Ahaz not sitting quiet as Yeshayahu instructed him, and paying off the Assyrians, he's essentially funded this horrible tragedy, because ultimately what happened here, because of Ashur at this stage, was a good portion of the kingdom of Israel, who are also part of Am Yisrael, part of the Jewish nation, were exiled. And later on, that was completed, and the entire kingdom of Israel, the entire 10 tribes, were exiled and gone since then. But essentially now what's happened is that was funded by funds from Yehuda, taken from the treasury of Yehuda, from the Beit HaMikdash, and that was used to fund the Ashur exiling the people of Israel. So that's horrible. That's a tragedy that it happened that way. It would have happened even if he had not done it. That's essentially what Yeshayahu was sending. But now he had a part in it. Achaz had a part, in this terrible tragedy. So the verse doesn't want to mention Achaz. It wants to avoid him. He was such a horrible king. Like we say, we want to avoid even mentioning the names of the wicked, because he essentially brought about this tragedy and what happened in the kingdom of Israel, even though it would have happened regardless. But he essentially now funded it. He took a part in it. He brought the Assyrians here, and everything that they're going to do. So because of that, the verse wants to omit his name, and it prefers counting the years to his father, Yotam, even though he's in the grave. Doesn't want to mention Achaz, and just to mention only still go counting by the righteous kings that came before him.
Is it only in this verse that they don't mention his name, or are there other verses which would bear out that theory?
No, he's mentioned many times in Tanakh, but sort of, on this key point where it says, it says what happened, that the Ashur came, and ultimately that led also to Hoshea killing off Pekach. All this happened, because Achaz had a particular role in this happening, in this terrible tragedy happening. That's why, it's sort of to avoid mentioning his name, not to give him the honor of counting, because counting to the kings of the years, just mentioned as an aside, it was considered an honor to a king. In other words, there's even, it's interesting, it's mentioned in the Talmud regarding when you put in the date in a like a shtar, like in a get or some sort of other monetary document, you have to use the years of the kingdom that you're living in. You weren't allowed to use the king's years of another kingdom, because the malchuyot makpidim zelze, the kings were that was one of the ways to show their authority, that their years, that's what we use in official documentation. So it was a sign of respect to the king. And here the Tanakh specifically on this point doesn't want to offer Achaz that respect, and therefore it's still counting to the years of his dead father, who was a righteous king.
I mean, Rabbi, you're telling us, and the books tell us what's recorded, but it's very surprising that a prophet of Isaiah's stature wasn't more condemnatory of this behavior of this king. It's also surprising that the Almighty didn't strike him down dead, full stop, on the spot, for the terrible things he done. I mean, to bring the altar from Damascus to Yerushalayim and so on, and to get away with it is really incredible.
Well,
there's nothing you can say about it. That is,
well, look, he certainly didn't have any success. I mean, his son was killed, right? His heir to the throne. That's at one point. Yeah. Most of his, 100,000 people were killed in his kingdom. He lost almost all his power. So nothing went right for him. He stayed alive because, ultimately he has to, the kings of Judah had an advantage because they were part of the lineage of David, and the lineage of David must be sustained. So, they had that security, as opposed to the kingdoms of Israel, that they weren't part of, the lineage of David. So there was nothing to sustain them. So even the most wicked kings, ultimately, they were granted at least that possibility of bearing a heir to the throne, not for their behalf, but on behalf of David Amelech. But other than that, he didn't have an easy time, for sure. Okay. All right, very good. So we'll stop here. And I think next time will be our last shiur on Yeshayahu. I think we'll wrap it up then. We'll finish up the words of Yeshayahu as to, in chapter 7, as to what's coming up ahead. Okay, Achaz has done what he's done, and now Yeshayahu is going to give his vision for the next steps. So we'll see a bit of that, and then I think we'll culminate our series on Yeshayahu.
Thank you, Diane.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Really
you.
interesting. Thank you.